Hey folks, today we have one of the giants of chiropractic research as our very special guest. I'll go further into her background in just a moment, but we have Dr. Christine Goertz joining us today. And if you don't know who she is, it's time to listen up. Get your act together. Don't you go anywhere, because this is going to be an excellent episode. First, though, here's that "Oh, How Sweet It Is" bumper music. All right, we're back. Welcome to the podcast today. I'm Dr. Jeff Williams, and I'm your host of the Chiropractic Forward podcast. So glad you're here. You have bounced your way straight into episode number 68, and we're so glad you did. We're here to advocate for chiropractic. We're here to advocate for you, while we also try to make your life a little bit easier. And part of that's having the right patient education tools in your office, tools that educate based on solid researched information. We offer you that. It's done for you. We're taking pre-orders right now for our brand new evidence-based office brochures. Colorful and cool, that's what I think. They're available at chiropracticforward.com. Just click the store link at the top right of the home page, and you will be off and running like a bandit. Just shoot me an email at dr.williams@chiropracticforward.com if something's kind of out of sorts or isn't working correctly. We're still tweaking things. If you're like me, you get tired of answering the same old questions, and these brochures make great ways of educating while saving yourself a little bit of time, a little bit of breath. They're also great for putting into like take-home folders and all that good stuff with your new patients. So go check them out again, chiropracticforward.com, under the store link. While you're there, sign up for the newsletter, won't you? It's just an email. We're not going to spam you. One email a week to remind you when the new episodes come up. And that's it. Now, let's get straight to it, because this is a big deal today, y'all. I want to introduce you to Dr. Christine Goertz, DC, Ph.D. She is the Chief Operating Officer of the Spine Institute for Quality, also known as SBI and EIQ. She's also an adjunct associate at the Department of Orthopaedic Surgery, Duke University Medical Center, an adjunct professor in the Department of Epidemiology, College of Public Health at the University of Iowa. Prior to joining SBI and EIQ, she was Vice Chancellor of Research and Health Policy at Palmer College of Chiropractic for 11 years. Dr. Goertz received her Doctor of Chiropractic degree from Northwestern Health Sciences University back in 1991, and her Ph.D. in Health Services Research, Policy, and Administration from the School of Public Health at the University of Minnesota, 1999. Her 25-year research career has focused on working with multidisciplinary teams to design and implement clinical and health services research studies designed to increase knowledge regarding the effectiveness and cost of complementary and integrative healthcare delivery. She has extensive experience in the administration of federal grants, both as a PI and as a program official at the National Institutes of Health. Dr. Goertz has received nearly $32 million in federal funding as either principal investigator or co-principal investigator, primarily from the National Institute of Health and the Department of Defense, and has authored or co-authored more than 100 peer-reviewed papers. Her primary area of focus is the investigation of patient-centered, non-pharmacological treatments for spine-related disorders. Our guest, Dr. Goertz, is a former member of the NIH National Advisory Council and currently serves on the Board of Governors for the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute. That's where she has assumed numerous leadership roles. In September 2018, Dr. Goertz was appointed to a 3-year term as Vice Chair of the PCORI Board by the Comptroller General of the United States. Wow, that is quite a mouthful and quite a set of accomplishments. Doing our profession extremely proud All right. Welcome to the show, Dr. Goertz. I cannot tell you how excited I am to have you on our podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Williams. It's my pleasure to be with you today.
Now, I understand you're out in Baltimore, and I think you're doing a talk or something, so you're under a bit of a time crunch, which is really a good deal because I could probably talk to you for hours. So,
well, I figured it's good to put a limit on it because who wants to listen to me talk for that long anyway?
Me, I'm raising my hand. Do I understand right that you might be in Texas this summer?
I have been invited by the Texas Chiropractic Association to speak at the annual convention in June. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, the Chiro Expo downtown Dallas, and I will be there. So I might just be in the front row.
Well, I look forward to that.
Okay, so let's get on with it. I want to first ask you, what was the impetus for you wanting to get into the research into the profession? How did you come to the decision to dive into the research full-time versus treating patients day-to-day like so many chiropractors typically do?
I think sometimes that I accidentally became a scientist. When I first started chiropractic school at Northwestern Health Sciences University back in the late 80s, it never occurred to me that I would end up going down the science end of things. I fully intended to become a full-time clinician, but as I started my chiropractic education, and we were learning in school about how to treat patients, I had a lot of questions about how do we know that works and how can we make sure that we're doing it the best way, and became aware that in many cases there was no answer other than clinical experience to those questions. And so I became very intrigued by the research opportunities. And when I was in my 5th trimester there, I started working in the research department as a research assistant, and that got me even more excited about the possibility of getting involved in research. And so I had the opportunity to enter into a fellowship at Northwestern after I graduated, where I would do research part-time and see patients in the faculty practice clinic part-time. And that is what really launched me. I started studying for the GRE right after I graduated from chiropractic school and started my graduate program the following year.
Well, so you were in it from the get-go.
I was in it from the very beginning.
Nice. Well, now I noticed on your CV that you're currently an adjunct professor with the Department of Orthopaedic Surgery at Duke University Medical Center in Durham, North Carolina, and also adjunct professor in the Department of Epidemiology, College of Public Health, University of Iowa. And all the while, you were working with the Spine Institute for Quality, also known as Spine IQ. That's a lot of stuff. Can you tell us what it is? A lot of stuff. Tell us what your regular day looks like for you.
Well, that's a hard question to answer, Jeff, because I don't really have a regular day. And that's one of the things that I love about what I'm doing now. I have a lot of different activities that I'm involved in, and I really get to focus on the things that are really of interest to me. I can give you some examples. So with Spine IQ, I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Spine IQ. It's a nonprofit that I started about 4 years ago. And one of the reasons why I left Palmer was so that I could focus a lot more time and attention on Spine IQ. And Spine IQ's mission is to define quality, demonstrate value, and build trust in conservative spine care delivery. And we're doing that taking a data-driven approach. And we've had a clinical data registry for a number of years now that can be used for CMS quality reporting, as well as a couple of other programs. But we're just now rolling out 2 new products. One is a patient satisfaction data collection program where we will collect patient satisfaction data directly from patients on behalf of doctors, and then give them quarterly reports that allow them to see how their patients are evaluating them based on a standardized survey that is used by all different types of healthcare providers. It's really the national standard for measuring patient satisfaction in the industry today. And we're providing an opportunity then for doctors not only to see how they're doing, but to benchmark themselves against everybody that's in our database. We're also rolling out the Chiropractic Quality Recognition Program, and we're really excited to be now going through the process of recognizing doctors of chiropractic who we've identified at the bronze level because they have demonstrated that they're participating in quality improvement programs or quality assessment programs, including Medicare's former PQRS program, as well as getting excellent ratings on health grades. So please, if people are interested in more of that, they can find out more at our website at spineIQ.org, so SBI and EIQ.org.
Now, you mentioned it's a nonprofit, so if chiropractors were to support that, donate to it, I'm assuming that would be tax deductible. Am I right?
That is absolutely correct, and we are extremely mission driven, and you'll see that the cost of our program to participate in all of our programs are extremely low when compared to other similar programs. For instance, with our patient satisfaction data collection, there are vendors who do that not so much in chiropractic, but in general, and our cost is about 10% of what you might pay for somebody else to do it, because we need to keep the lights on and the organization running, but we're really invested in how can we improve the quality and consistency of spine care delivery? How can we help chiropractors not only do a better job with their practice, but to recognize those that are doing an excellent job and to make that information more attainable for patients. So with our patient resource map, someone can go on to a map of the United States. We have about half of states done now. We have about 25 states done, and we hope to get the rest of the states done within the next month or so. But a patient can go on, they can search by zip code, and they can get a list of chiropractors in their area, and they'll be able to see how they've been designated by Spine IQ.
Nice. Now, that sounds like it's enough to fill up a day, but what about the Duke University and University of Iowa?
Right. So I absolutely love what I'm doing with Spine IQ, but it's really important to me to keep my hand in research in every way that I can. And I have opportunities to work with really excellent multidisciplinary teams at both Duke and the University of Iowa. So to give you an example, I had the experience earlier in the year to work with investigators at both Duke and the University of Iowa to put together a grant application that we submitted to NIH, where we will be, if we get funded, that is, and that's always a big if, but the goal is to be able to study what happens if a healthcare system allows early or promotes early triage to either doctors of chiropractic or physical therapists when a patient calls to request an appointment with a primary care provider for low back pain. And that project was really a lot of fun to put together. And again,
that's a great question.
It's a really important question because, as I'm sure you're aware, a couple of years ago, the American College of Physicians came out with a guideline on low back pain that calls for patients and doctors to consider non-drug treatments before any sort of pharmaceutical intervention. And really what this project is the goal of this project in a lot of ways is to implement the American College of Physicians guideline and to test what happens when you implement that in terms of both patient outcomes and cost and impact on the health system.
Now, that brings up kind of a sticky question that you may not be able to answer, but if you're saying what happens if you triage patients in that manner between chiropractic and physical therapists, well, we already know in the allopathic world that left to their own opinions, they're going to go to the physical therapist first. So does that lead then to research comparing physical therapy to chiropractic effectiveness, or how does that fit into the world?
The purpose of this study is not to compare PT to chiropractic. It's to consider this non-pharmacological treatment in general. And the way that the study is set up is actually that patients would make that decision about whether they would go to a chiropractor or a physical therapist, because this would be at the initial point of care before they even see a primary care doctor.
Right. Okay.
And based on Gallup data from the Palmer Gallup initiative spanning over 4 years, I would expect that a large percentage of those patients would choose chiropractic.
If we can keep them from any allopathic influence, I think you're right. Yeah, I just don't trust them that much.
There's always. What I would say, I have had the opportunity to be involved with the Department of Defense when they first started including chiropractic. I've had the opportunity to observe what happened in the VA with inclusion of chiropractic a little bit more from a distance, but I have had some opportunity to see what's going on and plus do research and gather information more informally about what happens to healthcare systems that include doctors of chiropractic. And what I have found overwhelmingly is that once primary care doctors, other medical doctors have an opportunity to work with doctors of chiropractic, they become much more willing to make referrals, to consider them to be partners in treating spine-related disorders. So my experience has been that that's really not that's something that we worry about a lot as a profession. Sure. But I don't really see things are different now than they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago, even 5 years ago. I think there's a lot more opportunity, and as long as we are taking excellent care of patients, as long as we take an evidence-based approach, as long as we're thinking about things from a multidisciplinary perspective, I just see wide open opportunity.
Well, I think that you are partly to blame for the difference in the last 5 to 10 years, for sure. So, whether you know it, that just led into my next question perfectly, by the way. But whether you know it or not, you've been a game changer for our profession, and you've probably unknowingly played a big part in some of our podcast episodes too. I don't know if your ears have been burning, but I want to start with one of your papers that we covered, and I called it the Veterans paper, and it was really, really big for us. Even though I call it the Veterans paper, you say it was done as part of the Department of Defense. And I wondered, did you notice anything big after it was published in JAMA? Was it, in your opinion, any more impactful than your other stuff that you've done?
Well, you always, it's an interesting life as a scientist. It's sort of like sending your children off to boarding school. You don't really know what happens, after they get on that bus. And so sometimes it can be hard to tell what the impact is, and some of the metrics that we use, like how many people cited, that may be interesting to scientists, but it's a little bit unclear whether that's actually translating into clinical practice, which is obviously what you want to see happen. I tell young researchers sometimes that how your work gets translated to that conversation between the doctor and the patient and how it impacts the treatment decisions are really what matters. You can get the most elegant paper published in New England Journal, and you can be very excited, and your mother can be very proud, but it really doesn't matter unless it gets translated into how we take care of patients. But one of the things about, so the JAMA article that you're referencing was published in a relatively new JAMA publication called JAMA Network Open, which means it's open access, and it's available online at no charge. In fact, anyone can download that article at www.jamanetworkopen.com. You can just search for my name and it will come up. But we've had more than 72,000 views on that article, and an altmetric score above 500, and we really got a lot of press, and I got a lot of follow-up inquiries about doing interviews and writing articles about chiropractic. So it was a little bit more clear in this case that particular study was having an impact. But I'm glad to hear that you've been discussing it, and I hope that we continue to discuss, not only this paper but other papers out there that are really important and hopefully are impacting not only how others think about chiropractic but also the way that we take care of patients based on the evidence.
Yeah, and that's what we do every week. But I got to tell you, on that specific paper, what happened is as soon as it came out, at least in my experience here in my office, almost immediately we began getting some interest from our local VA. And once we went through the whole credentialing process and got ready to accept them, we started seeing referrals almost immediately. Before that paper, there was absolutely no interest at all. We had called out there. I'd sent one of our practice representatives out there to speak with them, and there was just no momentum. So, and I don't know if you're ready to take credit for all that, but I'm going to go ahead and give it to you. On behalf of the entire evidence-informed chiropractic profession, I just want to say thanks.
Well, and on behalf of an extraordinarily large team of investigators led by myself, Dr. Ian Coulter at RAND, and Joan Walter at the Samueli Institute, I want to thank you, because it is extremely rewarding to hear you say that, and I really appreciate it. A lot of times you feel like you're toiling in obscurity for no money.
No. Yeah. I just saw one of those veterans this morning. So,
oh, that's terrific.
Yeah, in emails that we've been exchanging a little bit leading up to the interview today, you mentioned that you have a large pragmatic trial funded by the NIH within the VA. Can you tell us anything about that yet?
Absolutely. Well, I can't give you any results because we're still in the planning stages, but a couple of years ago, NIH, the VA, and the Department of Defense all teamed up together to put together a large initiative to look at non-pharmacological treatments for pain in both the Veterans Health Administration and in the Department of Defense. And ultimately, they ended up funding 11 projects and a large coordinating center at Yale University to help manage those projects. So this project, which we call Verdict, is part of that, is one of those 11 projects, and it's been really rewarding to have the opportunity to put this project together. We're working with just a stellar group of investigators, led by Dr. Cindy Long at Palmer, Anthony Lisi at the VA in Connecticut, Dr. Aaron Krebs and Dr. Rick Branson at the VA in Minneapolis. We have excellent doctors of chiropractic involved at the VA and at the University of Iowa, at Dr. Paul Shakel at the Greater Los Angeles VA Center. So it really is an opportunity to bring together a great team to look at a question that I think is incredibly important, and that's to do with dosing. I mean, how many times does a patient need to get in his or her car and drive to the chiropractic office in order to see an optimal benefit for back pain? And that's what this study is focused on, really more chronic low back pain. So what we're doing is we are going to be randomizing people to about 766 veterans to receive either about 5 or about 10 visits over a 10-week period of time. And then after that's over, we will be re-randomizing them to either get one scheduled chiropractic visit per month or basically to discharge them from the study. And the answers to both of those questions are incredibly important as we try to figure out how to best optimize chiropractic care delivery. And one of the exciting things about this study is that it's a pragmatic study. So we're not specifying, just treat the low back or only use spinal manipulation. It's really allowing clinicians to use the tools that they normally use in their tool bag, so that when we're done, we'll have a better sense of what actually happens in real chiropractic practice.
So will you be able to answer more questions as far as, well, first of all, I think that will go to help possibly standardize our profession a bit when we've got some sort of guidance on dosage, but will it also answer some questions about preventative or maintenance care if you're discharging them part of the group to once a month?
Right, and that is a big goal of the study. Right now, Medicare, their official policy is that extended care, or what they call maintenance care, is not medically necessary. But we really don't know the answer to that question. In fact, there's some preliminary data that indicates that it may help, that people who see a chiropractor on a regular basis like that may have fewer incidences of fewer exacerbations of chronic low back pain over time and better outcomes overall. But it's a question that definitely needs a more definitive answer than we have now, and we're hoping that this study, certainly, while it may not be definitive, will provide data that will help us do a better job of answering that question.
Right. Anders Eklund came out with a Nordic paper on preventative. Did you happen to?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, that is the paper that I was referring to earlier.
Right.
They'd done a pilot study, and then her most recent publication. So we were really encouraged. You start going on a trial like this, results like that are what you want to see as opposed to negative results. So
absolutely,
I heard somebody at a meeting that I'm at now talk this morning about how doing research is like contributing grains of sand to the beach, and how each of us makes that contribution, but it really takes all of it together for you to be able to start drawing more definitive conclusions. And that is an important thing to be able for us to be, able to build on each other's work and extend that work so that we're able to really come to answer some questions in a meaningful way.
Sure. Now, in your work called Ensure Coverage of Non-Pharmacological Treatments for Low Back Pain, Time for a Change, which was published in JAMA as well in October 2015, you said there are no policies emphasizing non-pharma treatment at the forefront of the patient experience, no meaningful levels of coverage for care professionals focusing on non-pharma therapy, and no policies providing financial incentives in favor of non-pharma. And I've seen your work make huge differences, but I have to admit I'm seeing reimbursements for chiropractors still being quite a challenge. So we have folks out here struggling in practice in spite of all of this stuff that's in our favor. Have you experienced any changes after that came out in JAMA? And can we expect these sentiments that you described to gather steam in the next year or so? I mean, is this something that's just got to simmer before we start seeing it actually benefit us?
Well, I like your analogy about simmering, and yeah, it takes time. They still say that it takes about 17 years for research findings to be translated into clinical practice, and I certainly hope that the research that we're talking about today doesn't take 17 years, but it does take time. That article came out in the beginning of October of 2018, so there hasn't really been an opportunity for significant change to happen prior to or since that relatively recent time frame. But what I will tell you is that I'm hearing a lot of discussion about it. I was at a National Academies of Science meeting in early December, where that article was the article that my commentary was based on was referenced. There was a lot of discussion about that. I'm hearing more and more talk about how payers can be more proactive, more inclusive about starting with non-drug therapy. Is the study that I described earlier, that is a collaboration between the University of Iowa, Duke, and also Dartmouth, as well as the level of collaboration that was involved in that study, I don't think would have happened even a couple of years ago. So I think there's increasing interest in that. So we just need to give it time. But the other thing is I think it's important. I see chiropractic as a profession moving more and more towards patient-centered, evidence-based care and multidisciplinary or collaborative care, and those are really the models that we need to embrace in order to fully take advantage of the opportunities that are out there as part of a healthcare team with a major focus on non-pharmacological treatments. And I think that we're going to be seeing different payment models evolve also. That the fee-for-service model will probably last for a while, but I think we are beginning to see the death knell on that, and that we're looking at groups of clinicians being paid to take responsibility for groups of patients is coming. Bundled payments are in other ways are coming. There's talk about basing payments on the quality of care or the patient outcomes. So we're going to see a lot of change, and I think the more that we can embrace that change and align ourselves with taking care of patients in the ways that those changes are going to require, the more likely we are to be included and to see our reimbursement levels reflect that.
That is wonderful news. 17 years, though, man. Let's hope it moves a little quicker than that. So in another piece of yours, it was titled, "What Does Research Reveal About Chiropractic Costs?" You say something I want to give you props on. You say, "Without a doubt, the most common issues raised by those outside the profession relate to the quality and consistency of chiropractic care delivery." And I think that I've mentioned standardization a while ago. I think we can all agree standardization is probably the biggest hurdle that we face as chiropractors, especially when we're talking about integrating into medical office or the system in general. Do you believe things like chiropractic residency training would better prepare chiropractors or chiropractic providers to offer high quality care within the medical facilities? I mean, for right now, I'm 2/3 of the way through the DACO program, so I'm on board with this stuff. What do you have to say?
Well, I think that the more training any clinician has, that the better equipped they're going to be to take care of patients. I mean, you remember that day when you walk across the stage, you graduate, and then you show up for the next day in the clinic, and you think, wow, do I really know enough? Do I really know enough to be able to take care of patients? I think that's something that a question that many of us ask, and just imagine if instead of walking across that stage and opening up your own office the next day, you would have had the opportunity to have additional training in a multidisciplinary healthcare setting where not only do you have access to different kinds of patients, but you also have mentors there and other clinicians, both chiropractic and otherwise, to help teach you how to take the best care of patients possible. So I think that additional training can always be important. And learning how to work within the confines of a existing healthcare system, I also think is extremely valuable. As I see models of care moving more and more in the direction of multidisciplinary care, and working to try to build models for how chiropractic care can fit into multidisciplinary teams and evaluating those models, I think that having the opportunity for a residency can really facilitate that process. The other thing that it does, and in addition to helping the doctor of chiropractic become a better doctor, it helps the other clinicians that you're working with, become better doctors, because as they start to learn more about chiropractic and how highly trained, well-trained doctors of chiropractic are, and to recognize their rightful place as part of a multidisciplinary team, I think that all of that helps patients in many ways and provides more opportunity for the chiropractic profession in the long run. And certainly when I talk about the consistency of chiropractic care delivery, I want to be really clear that I'm not talking about every patient gets treated, the same way by every doctor. It's not a cookie cutter kind of thing. It's more that the patient should have a general understanding of what's going to happen to you when you walk into a chiropractic office, that I think is often not there right now.
It's not.
And that's what I think that we need to change. And that's one of the reasons why that we developed the SBI and EIQ quality recognition program, because we want to help patients know what to expect when they walk into a doctor's office. And so doctors that are recognized at the silver and gold level are asking them to give us a list of the techniques that they use. And then we're developing reviews of the literature and working with Logan University to develop videos so that patients will be able to see what is the science behind that technique and what does that technique actually look like. So again, that they have a much better idea of what to expect.
Right. Now, you may have partly already answered this question, but in that same paper, when talking about costs for chiropractic care, you point out that we're likely equal or less in cost. And you say, in particular, it appears that patients who visit a chiropractor are less likely to undergo hospitalization, resulting in lower global healthcare costs than those who receive medical care only. So do you feel that the medical field is coming to the point they're seeing our potential in improvement as well as our cost effectiveness on more of a widespread scale, or are there just little pockets here and there? Is the medical field starting to catch on, but the insurance companies are still not quite allowing the change? So what do you see on your end of it?
Well, I think that it's both. I think, quite frankly, that still, even today, relatively few health plan administrators and relatively few primary care doctors or specialists are thinking about chiropractic care related to the problem the crisis that we're facing with opioids or how to manage the high prevalence of low back pain. And I have seen shocking examples of bias against chiropractic as recently as yesterday.
Right.
by one of our medical colleagues, but overwhelmingly, what I see more is just really a lack of information, or just not even being on the radar screen at all.
Right. Okay. You were recently part of a paper that was published just this year, 2019, called Effective Chiropractic Manipulative Therapy on Reaction Time and Special Operations Forces Military Personnel, a randomized controlled trial. And the first thing I got to say is, I really got to talk to you researchers about trying to shorten the title of these papers. It's ridiculous.
We should. Yeah. That's pretty complicated to get through.
So anyways, you all concluded on that one that one session of chiropractic manipulative therapy had immediate effect of reducing the time required for asymptomatic special operations forces to complete a complex whole body motor response task. So tell me, what are we looking at here? Where is this line of research leading for future research? What does it mean to us?
Well, that's a really good question, and in some ways, this particular study I think led to more questions, more possibilities of future research than answering a particular question in a definitive way. And what we did is we looked at how fast were special operations forces able to respond to a number of tasks, both before and after they underwent spinal manipulation. And And while we did find some difference, immediately pre-post, but not later on. And so one question I have is from more of a basic science perspective is, what's going on there? Is there something that what is the underlying mechanism of action of any real difference that might be there? And then the second question is, to what extent is that meaningful? We know that reaction times, even fractions of seconds can be really important with these very elite special operations forces members. But if the result of the manipulation only lasts for a short period of time after the adjustment, then it's probably not going to be particularly helpful. So trying to understand more about what's going on there would be important. In this particular case, I would recommend that we go more down the basic science route to try to figure out what's going on, and so that we could try to figure out, is there something there that could be maximized in let's say clinically before we do any more clinical trials.
I would also wonder if one has some sort of short-term effect. What if this goes back to preventative or maintenance? What if it's a cumulative thing to where they went fairly regularly? Is that a more long-lasting effect, or that's just, I guess, preliminary questions I would have on the deal?
Well, no, that's a good question. And another question is, we were looking at people that did not have pain, but how does this impact people who do have pain? Because there are a lot of special operations forces that do have back pain. I would imagine it's very prevalent in the military. And so are we able to, is chiropractic able to keep them more pain-free and increase reaction times in that way? So they're just, as with every study, you end up with, 10 questions, and this is one of those where there are probably at least 20 questions.
Right. And when you're dealing with veterans, you run into things that you don't normally see in your regular population. I have a couple of veterans that have fallen out of helicopters, so you don't normally see that. No, that's exactly right. So I personally love the Palmer-Gallup thing. I really do. I think it has a very high value. So, are you responsible for instigating the Palmer-Gallup poll? What were the main goals in starting it, and do you think it's lived up to the original thought process behind the beginning point, its beginnings?
Well, first of all, I cannot take any credit whatsoever for starting that program. That was really the brainchild of Chancellor Dr. Dennis Marchiori and our Vice Chancellor for marketing and PR, Jim O'Connor, that put that together. And though Dr. Bill Meeker and myself both had an opportunity to get involved in the program from the very beginning. So the overall purpose was really we think we know that what patients or potential patients think about chiropractic or how they feel about chiropractic, but you don't really know until you ask. And so this was, 4 years ago when the program first started, it began as an opportunity to really find out how many people were going to a doctor of chiropractic in annually and or had ever been, and what were their thoughts about chiropractic. What were their beliefs about chiropractic and chiropractic education, etc. So that, and then over the years, we had the opportunity to peel back the layers of the onion and just ask deeper and deeper levels of questions. So I haven't talked to anybody that's been involved with the project who hasn't felt like it was extremely worthwhile, and that we really learned a lot that is helpful to us as we think about certainly messaging to not only chiropractic patients but potential chiropractic patients who may have a number of misconceptions about chiropractic care, but also it's allowed us to it's allowed us to think about, what are there some additional research questions that we should be looking at in addition to the data we gained from the Gallup study. Let me give you one example. We talked earlier about the dosing study in the VA, but one of the things that really set me on the path to thinking about why we might want to ask a question like that had to do with one of our early Gallup surveys, and that if you ask payers, and I have asked payers like American Specialty Health and Optum or United Healthcare, how many visits do they what is the average number of visits for chiropractic in their health system, they will tell you somewhere around 6. That's a fairly consistent answer. But when we asked patients in Gallup, if you've been to a chiropractor in the last year, how many visits did you have? It was about 11. So I started, really wondering, what is this difference between the 6 that payers are saying that doctors are providing and the 11 that patients are reporting? Of course, there are a lot of different hypotheses, but as I started talking to doctors of chiropractic, one hypothesis that I started having was that there are some doctors who are the patients are being converted to cash patients after the 6 visits.
That was my immediate thought.
Because they feel that they don't want to, let's in quotes, get in trouble with the health plan, but and that's a real problem if payers are going to be developing alternative payment models or bundled payment models based on the number of visits that they think that patients are getting, but that's not really the number of visits that they're getting or the number of visits that they need, then that's really an issue. So trying to get good data out there on the number of visits that is required is really important. And certainly, that Gallup project helped to move our thoughts in that direction.
Okay. I thought this was an interesting question. A listener and member of our private group on Facebook, Dr. Trent Ping, which I believe he does research as well, suggested that I ask you which chiropractic adjustment technique or techniques are sufficiently evidence-based in the literature, or are there any?
That's a really good question, and as we know, there are somewhere between 150 and 200 chiropractic techniques, depending on whose list you're reading. But I would argue that there are really only 2 techniques that have consistently demonstrated, mild to moderate effects in patients. Compared to usual medical care or other treatments. And those are what we call either diversified or HVLA, high velocity, low amplitude adjusting, or flexion distraction or low velocity, variable amplitude adjusting are the 2 where there is strong data supporting them. Those are the techniques that have been, when they talk about spinal manipulation in the papers, they're almost always talking about one of those 2 techniques. And in fact, they're mostly talking about diversified, but I've had the opportunity to be involved in 2 studies that compared both flexion distraction to diversified manipulation, and found that the results were approximately the same. If anything, actually, flexion distraction patients did a little bit better, even though those differences were not statistically significant or probably clinically meaningful.
Perfect. Okay, so this is a little bit of a long question, so indulge me just a minute. But in an article by Lisa Rappaport called "Adding Chiropractic to Back Pain Care May Reduce Disability," she interviewed you for this article, and she had a quote in the article from you that said, "Spinal manipulation, often referred to as chiropractic adjustment, may help heal tissues in your body that form as a result of injury, decreasing pain and improving your body's ability to move correctly." The other quote she had was from you is, "It is also possible that manipulation impacts the way that your body perceives pain through either the brain or the spinal cord, and or decreases pain from muscle strain, inflammation, and or spasm in the muscles next to your spine. And so the first comment I have on this is that I love that second quote. Going through this DACO program, I'm learning more and more about this. And I love the quote because there's more and more information coming out about what part the central nervous system plays when we're talking about pain sensitization, movement dysfunction, joint proprioception, and things like that. And I thought that quote brought some of that into consideration without getting too complicated for the normal reader. So good job on that. And I remember thinking to myself that there are a lot of quotes from you in this article that were like may help, and it is possible kind of language, which I know is research talk. I know that. But I understand that researchers shouldn't formulate the opinions or conclusions in definite terms or absolutes, and I get that. But my question here is, do you ever see a time that all chiropractors can say with a high degree of confidence exactly what happens and exactly why it helps people heal or feel better?
I certainly hope so. But we are a ways off from that. Looking at the potential mechanisms of spinal manipulation it's not my area of study, but it's an extremely important area of inquiry and something that we need to pay much more time and attention to. But I think at this point we are a ways off, and as with many treatments, not just delivered by chiropractic, but many medical treatments, we know part of the story. We're starting to fit the pieces together, but there's a lot more opportunity to understand things at a higher level of certainty than we do now. And but you are right too that terms like likely and may are somewhat they are technically accurate and also somewhat science speak.
Yeah. So I'm getting close to your time limit, so I'm going to start scooting as quickly as possible, and we get through this. So I was sent a paper, I believe, that you have in progress called Assessment of Chiropractic Care on Strength, Balance, and Endurance in Active Duty U.S. Military Personnel with Low Back Pain, a Protocol for Randomized Controlled Trial. In the background section, you all say chiropractic care may facilitate the strengthening of trunk muscles, the alteration of sensory and motor signaling, and a reduction in pain sensitivity, which may contribute to improving strength, balance, and endurance for individuals with low back pain. So as you probably know, here in Texas, we're in an ongoing perpetual battle against the Texas Medical Association, and they recently just won a decision that was upheld on appeal, removing the neuro snippet from our scope description of treatment for the neuromusculoskeletal system. And essentially, they say we can only treat the musculoskeletal system, not the neuromusculoskeletal system. So with the research you've done and are currently involved in, what do you have to say about all that?
Well, first of all, I would say that this is a political argument, not a scientific argument, at least at this particular point. And I would say more research is needed.
Sure. Okay.
We definitely. I think I'd like to point out that I believe Texas is the only state that's having this particular argument, and we have to ask ourselves, to what extent does that make a real difference in how we actually treat patients?
Right. What has been your favorite project or finding that you've been a part of so far?
Well, that's sort of like asking which of your children do you like best. It's really hard to say, and different projects. I've been involved in different projects at different points of my career that have been really seminal at the time, at least for me in my learning process, that are really important versus projects that I think have had a lot of impact. Certainly the JAMA Network Open study in the Department of Defense has been a highlight of my career. I had the opportunity to develop some collaborative care models. We had a HRSA grant to develop some collaborative care model for primary care doctors and doctors of chiropractic to co-manage patients with low back pain. So it was a lot of fun to put that together. Even though it's not a study per se, putting together our primary spine practitioner model paper and getting that published in JAMA, in the Spine Journal was a lot of fun. Also, my very first study, which looked at the impact that chiropractic care had on lowering blood pressure, was obviously a really exciting paper for a really exciting study for me. That was my thesis for my Ph.D. Though I certainly wouldn't say that was the strongest study I've ever done, but it was seminal at the time. And then last but not least, I had the opportunity while I was a program official at NIH, and then later as a co-investigator after I left NIH, to be involved with a study looking at the impact of chelation therapy for coronary artery disease, and the preliminary results from that study were published in JAMA a few years ago, and NIH subsequently funded a follow-up study to look at the impact, particularly in patients who are suffering from diabetes, and I'll be really excited to see what the outcomes from that particular study are as well. It doesn't have anything to do with chiropractic, but I think it is high impact already and has the potential to be much bigger once the results from this next study are known.
Okay, so a tricky question here. What's been your favorite paper, project, or finding that a colleague has written that you were not a part of?
Now here, is really, really hard to answer because there are just so many excellent papers out. But just a couple of papers that I'm going to just limit it to the last year or so, just because otherwise there's just too many to list. But a colleague of mine, Dr. Aaron Krebs, who is at the VA in Minneapolis, published a paper on looking at the outcomes of opioid therapy versus non-opioid therapy, and found that opioid therapy did not lead to better outcomes than non-opioid medications after a year. And I think that was a real seminal piece that helped to put the nail in the coffin for opioids, because before then we were focused on the risks, but there may have been more hope that there was actually some benefit for people with musculoskeletal related conditions, and I think that study really demonstrated that that's unlikely. You talked earlier about my commentary on the study that looked at insurer policies for non-drug therapies for low back pain, but that study by Hayward and his colleagues, the original study, I think was really important. That also came out last summer. Certainly the studies the review of the literature that supported the American College of Physicians guideline for low back pain, headed by Dr. Roger Chow and his colleagues, was important. And then Dr. Michael Schneider at the University of Pittsburgh had a really important study come out, also on JAMA Network Open, on spinal stenosis, the impact of conservative care on spinal stenosis, that I think was a really important study. Every year I do a list of the top 10 most important studies that and often it's hard to only limit it to 10. It was a lot easier, 10 years ago when I first started this, to come up with 10. But these are all the studies that I've mentioned are on my top 10 list currently.
Would we find that through Spine IQ?
Yes, I believe that is on Spine IQ. I will check to make sure that it is within the next couple of days if it's not already on there.
Great. So I know that low back pain is one of the biggest reasons for disability worldwide, if not the biggest. I believe it is the biggest. It deserves the attention that it's gotten. Absolutely. We have research on low back pain now to the point that even traditional chiropractic haters can't really argue all that much with us on low back pain, which is nice. I love that. But we still have a fight on our hands when it comes to cervical manipulation. My question is, why do you think we don't see more research for cervical manipulation? And do you see the spotlight ever changing and the research beginning to focus on cervical manipulation and the benefits for neck pain and headaches, migraine, things like that?
You are asking an excellent question. So several years ago, the first big grant that I ever applied for when I got to Palmer about 12 years ago was a center grant where all of the projects were focused on cervical manipulation. And I actually used non-rotary cervical manipulation in all of the projects because I was told by an NIH official that would get a better reception than rotary cervical manipulation, given the controversy. And so that's the direction that we went in. And then later, one of the original projects was to see if we could replicate the Backfrist study on using NUCA in order to treat hypertension, and we lost our clinician, NUCA clinician for that study. And while we were trying to recruit another one, NIH came to us and said, we want you to change the study to back pain instead, which we ended up doing. So one of the problems that I face as a scientist is I'm only able to conduct the studies that somebody is willing to provide funding to do. And so far, the majority of the opportunities have been in the area of back pain. I would love to do more on cervical manipulation. I would, both the safety and the outcomes. I would love to do more on some of the more viscerosomatic conditions as well. Remember, my thesis was a study on chiropractic care for hypertension, and do more of those kinds of studies. But in order to do that, we need to have funding sources. And I would implore doctors of chiropractic to consider contributing more towards research efforts, towards Spine IQ, where we, as we ramp up and get more patients involved in our clinical data registry, we'll have the opportunity to use large databases to look at, safety and outcomes, which I think is a really great way to start, but also the opportunity to do multidisciplinary clinical trials. But I'd love to see the chiropractic profession step up and contribute more money towards research so that we're not having to go outside the profession in order to conduct research. Right now, NCMIC Foundation, they do a fantastic job with the resources that they have. I wouldn't be a scientist today, actually, without NCMIC, because they provided the initial funding for my postdoctoral fellowship that allowed me to finish my Ph.D., and then also provided the funding for the thesis on hypertension that I talked about earlier. But one organization cannot possibly meet all of the need that we have for research.
Right. There's definitely a big gap, a big vacuum there that needs to be filled. I mean, for sure. So in the private Chiropractic Forward Facebook group, we talked about this interview coming up, and I asked them if there was anything that I needed to ask you. So I got a little help from them. But we're pretty much all curious. What are you up to right now? We know you've got the pragmatic study that we talked about at the very top of the show here. If there's anything else, what are you up to right now? What are we working on?
Well, I'm working on, we're hoping that we'll get permission from NIH soon to launch the study in the VA in September. So that's a very big project. I am committed about 10% of my time to work with investigators at Duke on a number of projects. I'm working, as we talked about before, I'm doing some stuff with the University of Iowa. I had an opportunity to do a seminar for grad students in the epidemiology department a couple of weeks ago on pragmatic clinical trials and why they're important. So definitely involved in all of those things, but my majority of my focus right now really is on Spine IQ and how we can you, again, take a data-driven approach to identifying good conservative care clinicians, really with a focus right now on chiropractic and figuring out how can we get that information to primary care docs who might be interested in making referral to doctors of chiropractic, and how can we get that information to patients so that they can make educated decisions about which doctor to choose.
I like it. That's exciting. I'm going to be checking out Spine IQ a little heavier as soon as we hang up. But apart from what you are working on right now, what are your goals in regard to research for the next 10 years?
Well, that's a really good question, because I hope that in about 10 years I'll be starting to think about that villa in Italy that my husband and I talk about every now and then. So I really see the next 10 years as the capstone of my research career, and I'm focused on two things. First is, how do we answer questions that really matter to patients and to clinicians? So things like, what happens if you go to a doctor of chiropractic first when you start to suffer from back pain? What is the impact on what patients and health systems? Are people that go to a doctor of chiropractic early on, less likely to take opioids? And I had the opportunity to be involved with a team led by Tony Lisi that looked at that question in the VA, but there's really a lot more work that needs to be done. We've barely scratched the surface when it comes to costs of chiropractic care. So basically, there are a number of studies out there. They all show the same thing, that chiropractic care costs no more, perhaps a little bit less than other kinds of care, but there are a lot of problems with those studies and a lot more work that needs to be done in those areas. And in addition to that, I really would like to take a more proactive role in figuring out how do we translate the research findings that we already have into sound health policy. And so looking at not only having my science hat on, but also my health policy hat on, and trying to figure out how can we translate, and again, that I keep talking about spending, but that's part of what we're trying to do, is to translate data into policy, data into the healthcare decision-making process.
Into real life.
So how can we, into real life, that's exactly right. So talking to policymakers, be it, payers or purchasers, / employers, to our elected officials, to give them the data that already exists and to come up with models of care that can be actually adopted by health systems and by multidisciplinary healthcare teams. So translating the data that we already have into clinical practice, how can we educate, primary care doctors and doctors of chiropractic and physical therapists and patients about the American College of Physicians guideline on low back pain and what that means to them, and how they can actually implement that in their own practice or in their own lives.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Well, it's 12:10. I've got you out on time for your talk in Baltimore, and thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. I hope that our listeners got as much out of this as I did. I really believe that our profession is where it is and is going in the direction that it's going, in a very large part because of you and your efforts. And I just want to say thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Williams. I really appreciate that. And I'm going to accept that on behalf of the literally probably 150 other scientists and professional staff that I've had the opportunity to work with over my career. It absolutely takes a village to conduct any research project, and so I'm the person that gets to talk to you today. But picture standing behind me, literally at least 150, if not more, people that have been intimately involved in this work in one way or another, and have made at least as great a contribution as I have.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, and you have a wonderful talk.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Take care.
Yes, ma'am. Bye. All right. So there you have it. Dr. Christine Goertz, truly a giant in our industry, and has just done so much on her end of things to support us and support what we're doing. Man, pretty cool. Pretty excited about that. I hope that you're going to share this with all of your friends. I think that the information that Dr. Goertz was kind enough to share with us is extremely important. So help me get the word out. Another thing I want you to get the word out is the message that we have every week. I want you to know with absolute certainty that when chiropractic is at its best, you can't beat the risk versus reward ratio, because spinal pain is primarily a movement-related pain, and it typically responds better to movement-related treatment rather than chemical treatments like pills and shots. And when compared to traditional medical model, the research and clinical experience shows us that patients get good or excellent results through chiropractic for everything like headaches, neck pain, back pain, joint pain, that's just naming a few. Chiropractic care is safe and cost-effective. It can decrease the chances of surgery and disability, and chiropractors normally do this through conservative non-surgical means with minimal time requirements or hassle on the part of the patient. And if the patient develops a preventative mindset going forward from the initial recovery, well, chiropractors can usually keep it that way while raising the general overall level of health for the patient. The key point here, if you don't remember anything else, is that patients should have the guarantee of having the best treatment that offers the least harm. And folks, that's chiropractic. Send us an email at dr.williams@chiropractic4.com. Let us know what you think of the show. Tell us what suggestions you might have for future episodes. We got a lot of great guests coming up. Next week is Dr. Anthony Nicholson, all the way from Australia, so don't miss that one. Feedback and constructive criticism, it's a blessing. Source subscribes, excellent reviews on iTunes and other podcast services. Y'all know how this works now. If you like something, you got to review it, you got to share it, and you got to support it. So help us out if you don't mind to take a few seconds to do that. Help us get to the top of the podcast in our industry, which would be so cool. We can't wait to connect with you again next week from the Chiropractic 4 Podcast Flight Deck. This is Dr. Jeff Williams saying upward, onward, and forward. Be sure to find me on social media sites such as Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. While you're at it, give us a thumbs up on YouTube. That's super simple. Be sure and visit chiropractic4.com. Give our podcast a listen. Lots of wonderful, wonderful information there. And as always, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.